tonight I thought I would discuss a topic that was, a question that was asked to me on on my Facebook page for Magical Experiments, not the group, but the actual page. And the question is, what is magic? And the person wasn't talking about like what's a what does, how does magic work? Like what's a definition of that explains how magic works? No, they wanted to know, what is actually magic? What, or as I might phrase it, what does magic seem to be? Using, Robert Anton Wilson as a guide when it comes to language, that we're not really describing the essence of something so much as what we think the essence might be, or Robert Schiappa's, argument with definitions, that what a definition does is it describes what something ought to be. Before we get into all that, I do want to show you, because I got it in the mail, my new book, Magic by Design. Ooh, ah, very pretty. And you can check out the link there for it in the thing if you're interested. So, in a way, that book is kind of about like what magic is, or, well, it's really about how to design your own magical workings, but it discusses in a very real way like how to work with magic. But I think it's an interesting question. What is magic? So I'm not going to give you the Crowley definition of magic is the art and science of causing change to conform in a conformity with will. I guess I did give it to you right there, but that's not what I think of as magic. I think that's a way of describing how magic ought to work. I don't agree that it's the best definition out there. I know some people get wet when they think about Crowley, but I'm not one of them. So, I think that it's worthwhile to just say that magic, that there's a very real difference between describing how magic ought to work and what magic actually is or seems to be. And it's interesting because the other day I saw this person, she asked this question, in relationship to, Star Wars and the Force. She's like, is Star Wars the Force like the Tao? And of course, that's a hard question to answer because you can't really define the Tao. I mean, once you define the Tao, it's no longer the Tao. I mean, my answer was that, with Star Wars, the Force, that it's about doing something, whereas with the Tao, it's about being something. Which doesn't necessarily describe the Tao so much as it describes an aspect of it. And again, like once you describe the Tao, the Tao is indescribable. So the question then might come to mind: well, is that what you're saying, Taylor? Is magic indescribable? Is it something that we can't really describe? And my answer to that is no. I think that magic is very it is something that's describable. I mean, we see umpteenth books written about the topic of magic, including some by yours truly. I mean, I'm not going to say all of them are great or good or what have you, but obviously people like writing about it. And that's not even including all the blog articles, the podcasts, and all the other things, and of course the people talking about magic. And of course, all that activity in of itself does suggest something very important, which is that magic is real. Like, you wouldn't practice magic if people wouldn't practice magic if they weren't getting something out of it. People might say, well, why do you got to throw the self-interest angle in there, Taylor? And the truth of the matter is people don't do things without an element of self-interest. That may sound incredibly cynical, but in my experience over the years, I have found that there's always a self-interest angle in why people do what they do. I think it's far better to honestly acknowledge it and bring it out into the open. So in the case of magic, people are obviously practicing magic for a reason. They are obviously getting something from it. Now, that could simply be spiritual fulfillment. It could be something else. It could be actual, practical, real results. I would argue for the latter, but I would say also there are some people who perhaps practice magic for the former. So the question comes down to, well, then, okay, well, what is magic, Taylor? What is this thing that people are doing? You've told us that, a definition like Crowley, or perhaps even like one of my definitions, that magic is something where you transform possibilities into reality, that's describing how magic works, right? But that doesn't describe what magic is. Well, I've thought long and hard about this question, and my answer to this is what magic seems to be. You can take it with a grain of salt, and you don't have to agree with me. You can come up with your own definition, use your experiences, whatever. But magic to me seems to be everything. It is life itself, and it is the experience of and connection to the universe, to the spirits, to the elements, to everything. When I am doing magical work, I mean, I think the one thing that really stands out to me, and I talk about this in the process of magic, is that magic is fundamentally about connection, right? You're connecting with something. If you want to change the world around you, you have to connect to something in order to manifest that change. Now, some people might say, well, that seems awfully vague, Taylor. So does that mean that if I go and I get a job, I mean, am I doing magic then? Because I'm changing something, right? I'm filling out an application. No, I mean, there are certain distinct elements at play within magic. I think that with magic, what we're doing is we are connecting with the spirits, with the elements, with the universe itself in a way that fundamentally is different from just performing a mundane activity. A mundane activity might be seen really as the most primal materialistic form of action, right? It's like, okay, like I'm gonna pick up this book and show it to you, right? Like I did earlier. That's a very material, mundane activity right there. The act of writing that book, turning, coming up with the words and the ideas and the concepts and everything else. I mean, that could be seen as a magical act, in a way. Certainly, it's drawing upon a level of inspiration and creativity. But when we look at magic, like if I'm doing magical work with an element or with planetary magic, I am fundamentally connecting with it in some way, and I am inviting it into my life. It's not just about inviting it into the universe around me, it's also inviting it into my life. And I think one of the other characteristics that stands out to me about magic is that magic essentially is something that, yes, it shapes the universe around us, it shapes the world around us, but it also shapes us. And this is one of those things where I think a lot of magicians are maybe disconnected in some ways from that. People are so focused on trying to control the world around them, to get specific materialistic results, that they forget that, what you're working with is going to shape you as much as it shapes the world around you. Like if to do an act of magic is to necessarily invite that magical work to transform who you are, as well as transform the world around you. And I think a lot of people miss out on that or don't understand it because, they're so focused on trying to control the magic that they aren't necessarily recognizing that to like really achieve the deeper connection with magic is to invite it in and to recognize that you don't so much control it as you work with it and you allow it to transform you, and that transformation basically prepares you for the transformation that you're wanting to bring into the world. That's a different way of looking at things. I know it's not something that I see in a ton of magical books, but I think it's a perspective that I have found again and again in my own experiences with magic. But it's an experience that it's an expression and an experience of magic that I've come to over, the course of over 25 years of magical practice. I mean, I've been doing this since I was 16, and I'm, 3 years away from 30 years of magical practice. I don't know, should I do like some big, anniversary type thing, like Sparkles 30 years of practicing magic with Taylor Ellwood, woohoo? Maybe I will do something like that. I don't know, but I've been practicing magic for over 27 years of my life, so I wouldn't say that I initially had that realization that when I'm doing magical work, it's transforming me. At least not in a conscious way. Yet on some level, I did, because like when I was doing the when I was doing some of the elemental work, one of the things that I recognized is that if I wanted to forge a deeper connection with the elements, that I needed to be willing to offer them something, not just take. And I think that brings me to another aspect of magic about what magic seems to be, that magic is really a relationship of give and take. Like you can take to a certain degree with magic, but at some point you also have to get back. And again, this is one of those things that I think a lot of people miss out on. You know, we get so focused on taking that we forget that we also have to give. And for me, that's kind of been the, I guess that's a fundamental shift and change in my own work with magic over the last few years, is that as time has continued to progress, I fundamentally changed my relationship with magic in a very deep and real way. You know, I would say that I live magic. You know, that magic is my life. Like I walk with the magic. Kind of like when Christians talk about walking with God. I know that'll seem blasphemous to some of you who watch this, especially if you're a Christian, but I mean, the reality is that when I look at magic, magic isn't something so much that I do, so much as that magic is something that I interact with every day, that I have a relationship with. It's in everything that I do in one form or another. It's something that I don't even necessarily think about a lot of the times. It's just something that I interact with. And that's what I really think, that like when we enter into a deep relationship with magic, that we do fundamentally shift our understanding and relationship with magic, because we're no longer focused on trying to do something with magic so much as we're learning to be with magic and to integrate the magic into our lives and to allow it to transform us, even as we transform the world around us. And you know, yes, we get results, but we also recognize that the achievement of those results is fundamentally asking ourselves to change who and what we are. And that brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is, why do I talk about magic so openly? No one's really asked me this question, but I thought, you know, I would share this with tonight's video, because you know, I do a video each week about this. I write books about it. I've chosen to write about magic using my legally given name, Taylor Ellwood. Taylor Ellwood is not a pen name; it is my actual name. And my decision to talk about magic so openly really came about because of an experience I had when I was 18. When I was 18, I've been practicing magic for 2 years. And at the time, I was friends with this kid. And, you know, he wanted to learn magic too. And so I was giving him books to read. And his parents were fundamentalist Christians, like super wacky fundamentalist Christians. And I guess they went through his room at some point and they found these books that I'd given him. And they told him that he wasn't allowed to be my friend. And they called my mom and told her. And my mom was a fairly devout Christian. She'd had suspicions for a while that I practiced magic, but she didn't know for sure. So when she found out, she was really upset, because she'd asked me a few times and she felt like I'd lied to her. She didn't realize that the reason I didn't tell her is because of the exact reaction that I got. I mean, she'd found out, and when I came home, she basically, one day from work, she basically, or for something, I think it was hanging out with a friend at the time, but I came home and she told me that I had a half hour to choose whether or not I was going to move out of the house or if I was going to burn my books. Now, at the time, I didn't have a job. I was a senior in high school, and I really wanted to finish high school. And I had to face a really tough choice. Do I move out of the house and try to make it on my own when I don't have a job? I have no job. I won't have a place to live. I'm going to have to figure these things out on top of trying to go to school. And I would have had a friend or two who probably would have let me crash on their couch, you know, and everything else. But in the end, in the long run, in the short run, I would have had to figure some stuff out. So I had that particular issue. Or did I let her do what she wanted to do, which was basically to burn my books? and get rid of them. And I made a calculated choice. I told her that I'd let her burn my books. I went upstairs and I hid the books that I hadn't read and the books that I had read but that were important to me. And I found the books that I had read and didn't really care that much about, and that was basically it. And I brought those out, and she also made me bring out some comic books I had, the books of magic comic books, because she was really ticked off about this. And she made me bring those out too. And we went out to the backyard and we burned those books and those comic books. She lectured me for a while. And the entire time, what I was thinking was, never again am I going to hide what I believe or practice, because this is the result. Yeah, I had been waiting until I moved out of that house to basically be more open about what I practiced. I don't know if I ever would have really told my mom, but she found out. And I realized that fundamentally that experience actually was as traumatic as it was, as painful as it was something that transformed my approach to magic, because it made me realize that to be a magician was not to hide, at least not for me. Now, I know there are people out there that are in the closet, and I'm not sharing this story to shame you or tell you that you should be out of the closet or anything like that. Each person has to make their own choice, and there are very valid reasons for staying in the closet. And I can tell you that being outed from the closet, the broom closet, sucks. It made things with my mom really tense for a while. And I even had like a year or so later, I had death threats from that friend's family. His stepdad and his real dad, who hated each other's guts, decided to team up and threatened to kill me. And the stepdad called me once an hour, each hour, telling me how he was going to come get me, singing Christian hymns. I had to disconnect the phone. That is a really scary experience. And my mom's response to that at the time was, well, if you didn't believe what you believed, this wouldn't have happened to you. And I've never forgotten that, because it was actually it was just not a cool response at all, and not something that I've ever really forgotten, along with the burning of the books. But it really, at the same time, even that incident made me realize that, at least for me, that I needed to be open about what I practiced. So I started being a lot more open. I didn't hide. And when I decided to start writing books, I made a very conscious decision to write with my name instead of using a pen name. I could have used a pen name. I did debate about it for like a moment or two, but then I was like, no, I am not here. This is for me a choice, a cold, calculated choice, that I am going to do this on purpose, that I'm going to be open. And has it come back at times to bite me in the butt? Occasionally. It does make things interesting at times. But I won't ever hide who I am, because hiding who I am is not the way to go. And I will admit, at times I've chosen to admit that I practice magic, which isn't to say that I've hidden it. Like if somebody asked me, but I haven't like broadcasted it per se. When I was doing my business coaching business, and I was working with clients, sometimes I'd work with clients and I wouldn't bring it up. And unless they happened to Google me and bring it up, I wasn't going to go out of my way. And sometimes, like on some of my different, like my social media streams, I had like a couple different social media streams where I was very business focused. Now, I could argue at the time that really the reason I was doing that was for my business, but I'll be honest with you, part of it was because I didn't want to necessarily advertise it, because it was like, well, hey, if I don't have to advertise it, why not? They Google me, fine. And I eventually came to realizing with that like I just like that doesn't work for me. And I think like that was one of the things, like a couple of years ago, like I when I was going through everything kind of falling apart in my life, except for like the most important thing, which was my marriage. That was going great, but everything else falling apart. I realized, I was tired of living a life where I was feeling divided. So I made the choice to stop, because I mean it was my choice. I just decided I needed to be out there in all my glory. And so like anyone who comes on my LinkedIn now finds out pretty quick, oh, he practices magic. And I'm okay with that. But again, there are very good and valid reasons for people to be in the broom closet. So my story is not a indictment on any of those people. It's certainly not me trying to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I mean, you each have to make your own choices. But I share it because I think it's worthwhile to note that sometimes, that is the choice you end up making, and you have to be aware of that choice and what that brings with you. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.